Wisniewski, he's the parks director, so I work for him.
He's the boss.
Okay. If you turn to the second page, just kind of give you guys kind of a quick timeline of what transpired around here. It was not only the December 27th king tide of the extreme water level, the low pressure, the north wind. There was some events previous to that where actually started seeing some erosion occurring. We believe that is attributed to what occurred out here on the 27th.
I appreciate that effort, and yeah, just want to say thank you for that. With that, I am here to was asked to come talk about the repair work that is currently in process for the beach embankment, but there are like 4 different projects happening at Lighthouse. At the Lighthouse property kind of simultaneously right now. And I can kind of touch on all of those and answer any questions, or to my best, answer any questions that you may have. But I will start first with the repair work. And so, as you know, and kind of I'll try and do my best to walk through how we got to where we're at currently. So it all kind of started last November. Last November of 2022, we had high tides and winter storms, normal stuff that we typically have. And while in November wasn't the main event, it did set up the impacts that happened in December of 2022. In that we have seen photos and heard accounts from folks who live adjacent to the park and right on the beachfront there, where the beach was impacted in November and lost about a foot of sand. And this is normal. That northern beach is pretty dynamic, has sand loss as storms come through, and then it gets built back up as the tide. And everything kind of shift and twirl around and bring sand in and pull it back out. And so this is a natural cycle that happens there. But what we saw in November was part of that cycle, about a loss of about a foot of the beach sand go away. And so it basically weakened the shoreline there. And then in December, as you know, we had kind of 3 primary weather events happening, one stacked on top of the other. We not only had the high tides, the king tides, we also had low barometric pressure that allowed the water levels to swell a foot higher than what was projected. And we had, I think, like 3 inches of rain that had come down, plus the snowfall that was melting, coming from the uplands there. And so the 3 of those converged in late December, and we ended up with a bunch of overtopping of water on the northern shore, as well as the eastern beach, and then we had the rainfall coming down from the uplands and everything kind of settling in the wetlands area. Behind the lighthouse. And Andy Nelson, the Public Works Director, describes this area as a bathtub, basically. You get so much water, and it has basically a rim around it, and it holds the water in. And the only way for that water to escape the area is through the outfall pipe that goes out into the Puget Sound on the eastern beach. Well, and Public Works maintains the outfall pipe, but we are challenged with the outfall height. So as it extends out into the Puget Sound side, it's at if I remember correctly, about a 6-foot level, which means that the tides need to get below 6 foot before any water will be allowed to escape. If even at the low tide mark, it doesn't go below that level, no water is going to be able to get out of the wetlands simply because it's being held in place. And what we experience is in the winter when we have these high tides, it also means that our low tide mark is higher than normal too. And so we find that we end up having these times, because we have high and low tides that happen twice a day, and one of those is higher than the other, they're not equal, that we only have about a 6-hour period where water can actually escape the wetlands area because the water levels get below that low mark. That is simply not enough for the volume of water that is experienced in the wetlands, certainly at this time, and it basically backs up and retains a bunch of water in the winter months there. The other challenging part is that the outfall pipe is only 18 inches big. And so it doesn't transmit a high volume of water either. So it is a combination of the tides need to get a certain low, you have a short period of time for water to get out, and the pipe is not very big, and so it does not allow a bunch of water to go. Regardless, none of this would have prevented the weather incidents that we experienced. And through the modeling that we had Blue Coast engineers do, they're a coastal engineering company that were already on board. Doing data collection for project number 2, which is this long-term investigation of looking at converting the wetlands into an open tidal flow estuary, saltwater estuary project. They were able to do a bunch of data collection when this event happened because they had water meters in place, and they could could take the data, put it into their computer and do some modeling. What they discovered was that the water coming into the wetlands area, about 35% of it came over the northern beach. About 35% came over the eastern beach, and about 30% of it came from the uplands down, from rain and the snowmelt. And so we kind of had a third coming in from different locations and basically filling up that bathtub without the opportunity to escape. And so following this, the county had to declare an emergency really quickly. They did that at the end of December. And then within the week of this happening, the public works crews were out there and installing the super sack sand walls that still exist today. To prevent further intrusion of the water and to begin pumping and nonstop 24-hour multi-day pumping to get the water out. What we found was that the damage to the northern beach did not happen from the overtopping and the water coming in, it happened from the water going out. And so we had overtopping, and the overtopping didn't happen only in the park. It happened all along the shoreline from Point No Point down to Norwegian Point Park. We had overtopping at Norwegian, and we had flooding there too, as well as the private property in between. But it all kind of went behind the residence there, and the road is the low spot, and so that's where it settled and flooded. For the escape route of the water, the low spot is through the park. It is through, if you're familiar, you've got that 90-degree bend right there, and then you have the entrance to the park, and the northern beach is immediately on your left when you enter the park. That is the lowest spot all along the shoreline there. And so when the water was receding at low tide, that's when it basically grabbed the beach and pulled it out into Puget Sound, and we ended up with the scouring on the North Beach there. So Public Works came in, they put in the sandbag sand wall, they allowed the water to retreat, and then when the tides were starting to shift, they put the sandbag wall back in place and basically covered it up so that then the incoming tide could not overtop the road and re-flood the area. They let as much escape as possible, locked it off, and then started the pumping to bring down the levels. This ultimately led to a point of, as we got closer into the spring, the tides in the winter storms kind of receded, and then we kind of shifted towards, okay, how do we fix this? What do we do? What are our next steps? And so we, Kitsap County, got Blue Coast Engineering on a different contract to begin work on coming up with engineering and design for repairs to the beach. And what they evaluated wasn't only the northern beach there, but it was basically the northern beach all the way around the point and over to the eastern beach. They've come up with a full-fledged plan that includes on the northern beach bringing sand levels in that exceed the pre-storm elevations that were in there prior to December of 2022. And that would be along the shoreline. But adding a secondary dune, and the secondary dune would be even higher. It would top out about 14 and a half feet. Currently, just for the sake of providing the road is at about 11 feet. The shoreline beach, when it was overtopped, was at about 12 and a half. And so we'd be looking at raising this significantly higher, creating 2 dunes there, and then doing a bunch of plantings on those dunes to help stabilize and hold those soils in place. They wouldn't just be so loose, just loose sand to go and move back and forth with the tides. That's the plan for basically the North Beach, the long-term plan. As you kind of move towards the lighthouse along the beach, there's a parking lot there that got slightly undercut as well. The shoreline used to be much further out, and then it came right up against the parking lot, and through the wave actions, undercut and scoured out the corner of the parking lot. We'll be doing some repairs to that as well. And then from about that corner is where the rock revetment wall begins and extends around to the tip of the peninsula there, and that sits in front of the lighthouse. That rock revetment wall has been there for 100 years, 100 plus years. It was not built to today's standards. It was, from what we can tell, basically a bunch of truckloads of rocks that were backed up and dumped there. And what part of the long-term proposal is to rebuild that rock revetment wall. And this would need to happen at a low tide period, with a contractor coming in, removing the rock, taking that the angle of the shoreline there, cutting it back slightly so it's not so steep, and then putting some fabric down, and then rebuilding the rock revetment wall with a combination of rocks of various sizes to help improve the stability and the overall, the long-term sustainability of that revetment wall as well. And then as you go around the tip and on the eastern beach, we also had overtopping on that side, and we need to do some repairs there as well. If you go over there and you're walking along the footpath that kind of sits up on top of the ridge, you can see where the water came up and over. It was primarily in locations where there were little footpaths that went down onto the eastern beach there, where when people going back and forth, it kind of carved it out and created low spots. Well, those low spots are now much wider and much deeper, and that's where we had overtopping. We'll be doing some repair work in there as well. And that's kind of, in a very brief summary, the grand picture of what we're looking at for to repair the beach from the impacts of the 2022 winter storms. We're not going to be able to do all of this work all at once. And so what we have done over the last year, and as the Blue Coast Engineering has done the modeling for the repair work, come up with the designs and turn those into construction drawings, is at the same time having conversations with the regulatory agencies that we will be required to get permits from to do any work in the shoreline, in the waterway. That is not only the county's own DCD, Community Development Department, but it's also Fish and Wildlife Department at the state, Ecology at the state, the Army Corps of Engineers at the federal level, and the U.S. Coast Guard at the federal level, because the U.S. Coast Guard still owns the parcel that the Lighthouse sits on. So the county doesn't own all of it. So regardless of what we are proposing or looking to do, the Coast Guard has to approve and sign off on what we're looking for. And so during these conversations, as well as, one other agency who has a stake in the game in terms of review, are the tribes. And they play a critical role in reviewing any work that gets done that involves not only the coast, but any type of waterway in the Puget Sound area. And so through these conversations and developing the design work at the same time, we've had to do some minor adjustments and changes. Some of that was due to what was going to be allowed in terms of the redesign of the beach berms, and some of that was modifying the timeline for the work based on how long it's going to take to get some of these permits. And where we have landed is, and I think you were talking about, I think it was in July maybe, that we were out at Point Oh Point standing in the parking lot.
It was June.
It was June.
20th.
And at that time, I think we were proposing a three-phased approach.
Right.
Okay, so that has shifted and changed. We're now at a two-phased approach today, because that phase two in that original approach is based on that timeline not going to be able to happen. So we have taken phase 2 and 3, shifted those into just a single phase, and kind of refined what phase 1 is. What all this means is phase 1 is what is going to be allowed under shoreline exemption permits. And this means this is the repair component of this grand proposal. And that means we're moving forward right now to get exemption permits to do work in the water, do work outside of WDFW's fish window, to bring the beach elevations, the North Beach only, bring in import sand, import some rock for some larger size rock for a base layer to create some stability, then top dress it with a larger amount of sand that matches what's there currently. Bring that back up to pre-storm elevations. That's as far as we can go. And that is what falls under what is considered repair. It means you're not going above and beyond what previously existed. And so we're going to go in. Phase 1 is just to get in there in the next 2 months to bring the beach elevations back up to where they were pre-December of 2022. Phase 2 is everything else that I talked about. It is increasing the elevation of the beach berms on the North Beach, adding a secondary dune on the North Beach, removing and rebuilding the rock revetment wall in front of the lighthouse. All of that is like new work. And we're proposing that in phase 2, which should be targeted to happen in 2024. That would give us the time allotment to get through the various permitting phases with all the different regulatory agencies. And some of that is already starting to move as well, but their review process takes a long time. I mean, even the county's community development department is stretched thin on staffing and just really behind in terms of their turning permits over. And so we're challenged in that respect. We don't get any favoritism, even from our own county departments, much less certainly not from the state or the federal review agencies either. So in terms of the repair project, that is the targeted design as well as timeline. And the one other thing to say is that The super sand wall that's there is not coming down this winter. It is going to remain in place until we complete phase 2. And that is because, it's great that we're going to be able to go in and in this phase 1, bring elevations back up to the pre-storm, but pre-storm was breached last year. So, if we have similar types of king tides and other storm events, it may get breached again. And so to really kind of, be conservative, we're going to keep the sandbag wall in place until we get these other measures done, and then everything will get, then the sandbag wall will get removed.
So the number one question is, everybody comes in and says, when is the parking lot going to be open again?
So not until after phase 2 is done.
After phase 2, okay.
Yeah. So part of the challenge too is we received damage to the parking lot, which I'm sure some of you saw. When you drive in the back right corner there facing the wetlands, and there's a bunch of sandbags sitting on top of it right now. But that whole corner of the parking lot completely collapsed in. There was water rushing over it, and it undermined soils, and the pervious surface is all completely gone. It needs to be pulled back and rebuilt and put back in place. So sad.
I was just going to ask about the pipe for the outflow. Can that be replaced to be a bigger one?
So the answer is maybe, but we don't know yet. And so I'll try and provide an explanation. And this kind of dovetails into the restoration project that is separate from the repair project. So the other one is this project that is led by Mid-Sound Fisheries, who their subcontractor is Blue Coast Engineering, and they are looking at possibly opening up the eastern beach to create tidal flow in there, and that would allow that outfall pipe to be completely removed. Is, can that project happen in the way that it's being investigated without providing undue harm or property damage to any of the existing property owners along the road? If the answer to that then is no, and we don't have an answer to this yet, they're still doing more work on this. If the answer is that there is no viable solution to open up the estuary, or turn the wetlands into a saltwater tidal flow estuary, then we would need to go back to the regulatory agencies and say, we cannot go forward with this project as proposed, and we are required by law to, before just replacing an outfall pipe with another one, we are required to investigate, can we change that mechanism to one that allows fish passage in from infancy to adulthood of those fish, but with the removal or the changing out of that piece of infrastructure. That is part of the process right now. If the answer to that is no, we cannot do that without putting danger or harm to the rest of the community, then they would have to review that and say, okay, based on this, you can't meet these requirements, then yes, they might allow us to replace it with something larger. But without doing this investigative work, they're not going to allow us to do it. So that's part of the desire to see Mid-Sound and Blue Coast continue on their work to see if this is even possible without doing any harm to property.
Now, from a realistic point of view,
2026 maybe?
So
Yeah,
we are currently charging forward with accomplishing phase 2 in 2024 within the fish window, which, if I recall correctly, is August 15th through October 15th. Don't hold me to those dates, I would need to double check, but which gives us that front end time to do the permitting and finalize the engineering and go through, do the work with the regulatory agencies.
Are the permitting processes sequential or are they linear? You have to go through one and then the other, then the other?
A little
Or can
bit.
you try to do everybody?
A little bit of both. So the agencies are slightly different as to how they review, and some of them want to see the others review first before they will do it.
Yeah.
And so
Not
it's,
in my backyard.
yeah, a little bit of both, which makes it a little bit challenging too from our end of like, where do we start? How do we move this forward? And if you start in on this, timeline approach of, okay, we're going to pass, agency 1 first, then move on to agency 2. Well, if you get approval here, but then agency 2 says, oh no, you need to change these designs, then you kind of got to start back in the process. And so that's why we're trying to be more upfront with the conversations with the agencies. We've already started talking to them and said, here's what we're kind of proposing. Please give us your feedback now so that we can make adjustments to the design before we even started on the permit process. So that by the time we do that, hopefully everybody has already provided their feedback and they're on board with it. And then it's just a matter of going through their
Get all the stakeholders on board.
Exactly. So that's the repair project to the winter storms. The estuary I kind of touched on a little bit. It's been ongoing for quite a while. I think like since 2017 is when Mid-Sound initially, 2017 or 18 is when they first started doing some data collection and evaluation work. The state did an evaluation of a variety of different fish habitat improvement locations in the Puget Sound, and they ranked them in terms of priority based on location, based on impact to the fish. And this potential project at Point No Point ranks #1 in the state.
Really?
Wow.
I feel that the tribes would have quite a bit of input on that, just because of their tradition out there.
Yeah, and it's possible. I don't know how those priorities or rankings were created. I just know that when it's been talked about and presented that this project ranks #1, but for a number of years, nobody's really touched it because the challenges are significant. The community is right there that sits at a low level, and so you've got to get everything dialed in just right in order to see if this is even possible. And we've not made a decision. The county's not made any type of decision as to whether this is going to move forward or not. We are still in support of Mid-Sound moving forward with evaluating a design, but we don't feel like we have enough information yet to even say, is this even a possibility? They've come up with a design that in their modeling seems to work well for the tidal flow. What has not been a part of that project just yet is how does stormwater factor into that? So there's a lot of other things, and the stormwater is not the tidal water, but water coming in from rainfall, from snow off of the hillside there and collects along the roadside. Like that water's got to go somewhere too. Currently it terminates into the wetlands there and then eventually out the outfall pipe when the levels are low enough. But the proposal is to, put a berm around the wetlands there so that if you open it up to tidal flow, that's going to get pretty high and certainly higher than our very low road there, so that's not gonna hold it in. But then where does the stormwater go? And so there's still more work to do to see if all these systems coming together is even a possibility.
The fact that they're even considering this estuary project, does that imply that historically it once was a saltwater estuary back there? And
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, if you go back far enough
so
in
you're not
time-
trying to create an estuary where one didn't exist before?
No, but we are proposing to, or what is being proposed is to modify the outlet into the sound, because in history, based on the T-sheets from way back when, it was coming off the northern beach, was the, where the water came in and that tidal flow and that saltwater estuary was. It wasn't on the east beach, but we obviously can't go to the north because of all the homes and infill that was brought in there to allow the road to cross over to where the lighthouse is. Water not just coming in from the north, but also from the east and from the uplands. And so it was a combination, but what we don't have today that was there, 150 years ago, was tidal flow out the North Beach. And that's where it historically was. And then that was filled in and manipulated.
Yeah.
And so that creates the conundrum that we're in today, and has spawned the exploration of, well, we can't take this back to,
Exactly how it was.
exactly how it was, but could we modify that a little bit? Still have the tidal flow, which helps the salmon habitat, but instead of out the North Beach, could it possibly still be accomplished at the East Beach?